Sometimes the past arrives like a soft tide at night, not to startle, only to touch the shore of your breathing. Let the room dim, let the day fall away. In this quiet, every worry becomes smaller than a sigh. Feel the weight of the blanket, the slow rise of your chest, the way silence gathers like candlelight around your thoughts. We will not chase kings or storms tonight. We will listen for gentler things. Footsteps on old wood, cool air through stone, the hush between heartbeats. Close your eyes. Inhale, exhale, and let time open like a door left slightly ajar. When you are ready, drift with me softly into another age. The night lingers just a little longer than it should, as if the world itself hesitates to wake. A faint grey light seeps through the cracks of a wooden wall, catching the curve of a sleeping figure, a curl of straw, a forgotten cup. The air is cool, still heavy with the scent of smoke from last night's fire. Somewhere, far beyond the edge of this small room, a bell tolls one deep, deliberate note. Then silence, then another. Its echo ripples across the valley, brushing the roofs of huts, the slow breath of animals, the weary bones of people stirring in half-sleep. You awaken, though not as yourself. Not in this century, not in your bed, not surrounded by the soft hum of machines. You awaken as someone else, a soul of another time, another rhythm. The year is 1325. Your bed is a heap of straw and faded cloth. It creaks beneath your weight like a memory. The blanket covering you is coarse, woven of wool that still carries the faint scent of sheep and rain. Beneath it, the chill of dawn clings to your skin, honest, raw, almost alive. For a moment, you stay still. The air hums softly in your ears. There are no clocks here, no electricity, only the rhythm of the world itself, the slow heartbeat of time before time had numbers. Outside, a rooster calls once, then again, as if uncertain that morning deserves to begin. You hear footsteps, careful, deliberate, crossing the dirt floor. Someone, perhaps your mother or brother, stirs the dying embers of the hearth. A spark catches, then blooms into light. The room glows faintly orange, and shadows tremble along the walls. It is one room only, shared by everyone. The roof low, thatched with straw. The floor hard, cool, uneven beneath bare feet. In the corner, a goat shifts. A pot of water sits beside a wooden bucket. Life is simple here, and because of that, complete. You pull the blanket aside and sit up slowly. Your joints ache not from age, but from living close to the earth. The air smells of people, of smoke, of damp wood and bread that once baked days ago. To a modern mind, it might seem harsh, but to the body that knows no other world, this is comfort. This is home. The light that enters through the window is muted, a pale silver through the cloth that covers the frame. It dances gently as the wind moves it, as though the day is breathing with you. Outside, mist curls through the narrow lanes of the village, a soft, shapeless thing that makes the world look half-dreamed. You rise and stretch. The bones of the house creak as if stretching with you. In this small place, everything feels connected. You, the floor, the air, the smoke, the faint sigh of your sleeping family. The world is not divided yet into nature and home. It is all one continuous breath. You step toward the door. The latch is a simple wooden bar, smooth from years of hands passing over it. You lift it, and the door opens with a sigh. Outside, the cold rushes in sharp and clean. The kind of cold that smells like iron and moss. The village lies quiet, half swallowed by fog. Roofs glisten faintly with dew. Somewhere, water drips from the eaves, rhythmic as a clock that hasn't been invented yet. A thin trail of smoke rises from a nearby chimney. You can hear the distant low of a cow, the flutter of wings, the steady beat of a blacksmith's hammer far away. And under it all, silence. A silence, not of emptiness, but of presence, as though the world itself is listening. You walk a few steps. The ground beneath your feet is damp and uneven. You feel the soil press up against your toes, the slow give of mud, the texture of the earth that holds you. Every sense is awake, but none of them rush. There is no need. The day will come whether you hurry or not. A woman passes by carrying a bucket of water, her face wrapped in cloth against the cold. She nods slightly, not with words, but with that quiet acknowledgement shared among those who live by endurance. Her breath clouds in the air like a small ghost. Children stir in doorways, rubbing their eyes. A dog stretches beside the ashes of a hearth. Somewhere, a man hums to himself a sound so soft it almost blends with the wind. There are no announcements, no headlines, no news. The world does not need to tell you what it is. You feel it through smell, through sound, through the weight of the morning pressing gently upon your shoulders. You return inside, your fingers numb. Someone has laid a bowl near the fire, warm pottage, thick and simple. Steam rises from it, carrying the scent of grains and smoke. You hold it in both hands and let the warmth seep into your skin. Outside, the light grows a little stronger. The fog begins to thin. Life stirs slowly, patiently, without spectacle. You sip from the bowl and feel it travel down your throat, rough, real, alive. You close your eyes. You listen again. This is not luxury, but it is life, unbroken and whole. A rhythm older than memory, still beating somewhere beneath the noise of centuries. And in this rhythm, something inside you exhales. You realize that even in this world of cold mornings and tired bones, there is peace, the kind that comes not from comfort, but from belonging. Time itself moves slower here, and perhaps, for tonight, so should you. Morning has taken hold now, though the sun still hides behind the low veil of clouds. The world outside is a watercolor of greys and pale golds, painted by mist and breath. You step beyond the doorway, and the earth greets you not with fanfare, but with quiet familiarity. The air smells of damp soil, hay, and distant firewood. A thin path winds between the huts, soft with mud. The ground clings to your bare feet, cool and yielding, as if reminding you that this is where everything begins and ends in the patient skin of the earth. The village stirs slowly. A woman crouches near a basin, scrubbing a pot with sand. Her hands are red from cold water, her movements steady and practiced. Behind her, a thin column of smoke rises from a chimney. The faint sound of a child's laughter breaks the silence, high, fleeting, like a bird darting through fog. This is not a world of luxury. It is a world of rhythm, of cycles so simple they disappear if you blink too quickly. Life here does not sprint forward. It circles back, again and again, like the turning of the seasons. You walk along the narrow lane and watch as the morning unfolds. Men lift wooden tools, hoes, sickles, baskets woven from reeds. The fields beyond the village glisten with dew, waiting for the first footprints. A dog trots ahead, its paws leaving brief marks in the wet earth. Each breath you take feels ancient. You can taste the metallic air, the faint sweetness of damp grain. Somewhere nearby, the rhythmic creak of a cartwheel rolls through the mist, followed by the snort of an ox. You watch as people move together, not in haste, but in quiet agreement. No one gives orders, no one shouts. Everyone simply knows what must be done. Work here is not a burden. It is a conversation between human and land. In the fields, the soil is dark and rich, flecked with old straw. Hands dig into it, turning clumps, loosening roots. The smell of earth rises deep, damp, and oddly comforting. Someone hums a tune without words, just a low vibration to keep rhythm. There is peace in repetition, the swing of a scythe, the rustle of wheat, the sound of breathing, of bodies that know this labor by memory. You pause, watching a man lift his gaze to the sky. He studies the clouds, measuring the mood of the weather. There are no forecasts here, only instincts, the bend of wind through trees, the smell of coming rain, the way light moves across the hills. A few children chase each other near the hedges, their laughter rolling over the fields. Their clothes are patched and frayed, but their joy needs no embroidery. They play with sticks, stones, and imagination. One pretends to be a knight, wielding a branch as a sword. Another hides behind a pile of hay, giggling until found. Their world is small, but it is whole. You notice a farmer standing near his ox, hand on its thick neck. He whispers something to the animal, a sound more felt than heard. The ox exhales a cloud of breath, patient, ancient. They have known each other for years, partners in this endless dialogue of survival. Around noon, the sky brightens. The fog lifts, revealing a horizon of trees bare and solemn. The faint warmth of sunlight settles on your skin. You look down and see your shadow for the first time today, faint and trembling on the wet ground. The villagers gather to rest. They sit in a circle on the grass, sharing what little they have: bread, onions, a small piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. The bread is dense and rough, the crust hard enough to test a tooth. Yet when dipped in broth, it softens, and the taste is simple, grounding. A jug of small beer passes from hand to hand, weak, cloudy, but safe to drink. The water from the well is suspect. The ale keeps them alive. You sip, the taste bitter and earthy. It settles warm in your chest. Someone begins to tell a story, not loudly, but with the calm certainty of one who has told it many times before. The others listen while chewing, eyes half closed, their expressions caught between fatigue and comfort. The tale has no hero, no battle, only a moral that lingers like the fading warmth of the fire, that patience feeds the soul as much as bread feeds the body. After the meal, there is no rush to return to work. The fields will wait. The sun moves slowly overhead, and for a moment, so do you. You lie back on the grass and stare upward. The clouds drift, reshaping themselves into mountains, animals, faces, the sky's quiet art. You realize how different silence sounds here. It is not the absence of noise, but the fullness of everything that lives. The bees weaving between clover, the wind bending stalks of wheat, the far-off clatter of a bucket dropped into a well. The world is alive, but never loud. Evening will come soon, and with it, the same circle of tasks reversed. The animals fed, the fires stoked, the doors barred against the chill. But for now, the day stands open, soft-edged and endless. You think of your own time of speed, of alarms, of tasks stacked like stones. And here, in this slow breath of another century, you feel something loosen. The simplicity is not ignorance. It is intimacy with land, with hunger, with the rhythm of being. As the villagers rise again to return to their labor, you watch their silhouettes move through the field, patient as shadows, humble as roots. There is no hurry. There never was, because the earth does not rush, it waits. And the people, bound to it, learn to wait too. Somewhere, a bell rings again, not to summon, not to end, but simply to remind. Time passes, quietly, whether we hear it or not. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of soil and smoke, of life both fragile and eternal. And in that moment, the world feels perfectly balanced, neither past nor present, only alive. The day lengthens softly. Sunlight now pools on the packed earth floor, a slow, honey-colored tide creeping toward the hearth. The air hums with movement, quiet, deliberate, human. It is the sound of hands meeting the world. You notice it first in the rhythm of small tasks, the clatter of a wooden spoon against a bowl, the low hum of a woman grinding grain, the faint swish of cloth against a washing board. Each sound is tender, unhurried, stitched into the music of survival. In this century, the body is both servant and teacher. It aches, bends, lifts, endures. It knows what must be done without command. And though life is short, it is lived entirely through the senses, through the patience of the skin, the memory of the muscles, the discipline of breath. You watch as water is poured from a clay jug. The liquid shines, reflecting a shard of sun, and for a moment, it looks like molten glass. The woman dips her hands into it. The water is cold, the kind that wakes the blood, that reminds her she is alive. She splashes her face, gasps, and then laughs quietly, as if surprised by her own breath. There are no mirrors here, no vanity, A face is known by touch, by warmth, by the way it softens when it smiles. A mother traces her child's cheek not to check for beauty, but to make sure it still carries life's heat. The body's care is simple, often rough. Cleanliness is not ritual, it is resilience. A basin of water, a rag, a comb carved from bone. Hair braided not for fashion, but to keep it from tangling in the wind. Soap, when it exists, is made from ashes and fat, its scent sharp and faintly bitter. Yet there is something sacred in the repetition, the way fingers untangle hair, the way hands wash another's back near the fire. Every touch says the same thing: we survive together. You step closer to the hearth. The warmth radiates from it, not fierce, but steady. A woman sits nearby, mending a tear in a tunic. Her fingers move deftly, guided by memory rather than sight. She doesn't measure or mark. The thread finds its way as though guided by instinct. She hums a melody low, circular, the kind that doesn't end, only fades. It is a song her mother sang, and her mother before her. The thread, the song, the hands, all parts of the same lineage. The door creaks open, and a man enters, his face flushed from the cold. He sets down a bundle of wood and wipes his hands on his tunic. His breath clouds the air for a moment before it disappears. Without words, he moves to help with the fire, adding one log, then another. You watch the small details of his motion, the crack of his knuckles, the tiny scar near his wrist, the care he takes not to scatter the ashes. The body remembers everything: the burn of work, the cold of winter, the kindness of another's presence. When illness comes, as it often does, there is no doctor to summon. A fever is met with damp cloths, whispered prayers, and the patience of those who wait. A cough, a cut, a wound, each treated with herbs, with hope, with the steady belief that the body will find its way back to balance if given enough rest and care. You can feel the fragility of it, how one small wound can become a story, how survival depends not on strength, but on endurance. And yet, there is no despair here. Pain is not a curse. It is a teacher, a companion, something to be lived with, not feared. An old woman sits by the fire, her back curved like a question mark. Her hands are thin, veined, stained by years of labor. She holds a cup of broth, sipping slowly. Every movement is deliberate, as though each gesture costs something precious. Yet her eyes, when she looks up, are alive, bright with a quiet knowing. The young help her to her bed, a frame of rough wood, a thin mattress stuffed with straw. She lies down without protest, her body folding into rest as naturally as dusk follows day. Someone places a cloth on her forehead, another covers her feet. The room smells of smoke, herbs, and skin. There is no fear of death here, not really. Only a deep understanding that the body, like the earth, gives what it can, then returns what remains. Later, when the air cools, you see others sit together near the hearth, massaging tired hands, rubbing warmth back into stiff fingers. The sound of breath fills the silence, long, shared, almost musical. It is strange, you think, how close they live to one another, and how that closeness becomes a kind of medicine. The warmth of bodies replaces the absence of comfort. The rhythm of voices replaces the absence of time. Someone begins to tell a tale not of gods or kings, but of a woman who once healed a village by listening to the wind. The others smile, not because they believe the story, but because they believe in the feeling it leaves behind. Hope, even quiet, is its own form of breath. Outside, the sky begins to fade to violet. Smoke drifts lazily upward, carrying the scent of burning pine. You step outside for a moment, feeling the coolness gather on your skin. The air presses against you, crisp and clean, and every inhale feels like an act of remembering. You realize that for them and for you, now life is measured not in hours, but in breaths, in the way the chest rises and falls, in the way the lungs hold on to warmth, in the way silence becomes a language of care. The body is fragile, yes, but it is also astonishingly brave. It wakes every morning to begin again, no matter how heavy the years become. It carries joy and grief in the same hands. You take one last deep breath, slow, full, deliberate. The air tastes of earth, of wood, of smoke and life. And in that breath, you understand. To be human is to endure. To endure is to love the world, quietly, through the body that keeps you here. Evening folds itself around the village like a woolen cloak. The air grows heavy with wood smoke and quiet, with the faint rhythm of footsteps on frozen ground. A bell tolls in the distance, not for warning, not for mourning, but for prayer. The sound is low and steady, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. It gathers the villagers without command. Doors creak open, candles flicker to life, and shapes move slowly along the path that leads to the chapel on the hill. The chapel itself is small, just stone and timber, a single tower piercing the mist. The wooden door moans softly as it opens, releasing the scent of wax, damp wool, and old wood. Inside, the light trembles. Candles burn unevenly, their wax pooled into small oceans on the altar. You step in with them, careful not to disturb the hush. The air feels thick, almost alive, a place where silence has learned to breathe. A woman dips her fingers into a bowl of water, touches her forehead, her chest, her shoulders. The gesture is slow, practiced, ancient. A man kneels beside her, head bowed, lips moving without sound. Around them, a dozen others repeat the same motions, a choreography of faith that has endured for centuries. There are no pews here, only benches worn smooth by countless hands. A child leans sleepily against his mother's arm. An old man clutches his hat to his chest. Some close their eyes. Some stare upward, searching the shadows for comfort. The priest begins to speak, his voice gravel and grace. His words rise and fall like a lullaby for the weary. He speaks of forgiveness, of patience, of a kingdom that cannot be seen but can be felt like warmth through cold cloth. His Latin rolls like distant thunder, a language few understand but all believe. You watch the faces around you, painted by candlelight, soft, trembling, human. For them, faith is not doctrine, it is rhythm. It is the repetition that keeps the heart steady in a world too large to grasp. The chant begins low, unison, almost like a hum. The voices merge, not perfectly, but tenderly. Imperfect harmony, fragile and real. The sound fills the chapel, rising up to the beams, weaving between the rafters where dust glows like stars. You feel it settle into your bones, not as belief, but as belonging. For a moment, the centuries collapse. There is no distance between you and them, between the now and the then. Only breath, shared across time. When the chant ends, the silence that follows feels alive as though it, too, is part of the prayer. A candle sputters, a chair shifts, a sigh escapes someone's chest. Then, the door opens, and the cold rushes in again. The villagers leave quietly, their footsteps soft on the frozen earth. The last light flickers, then steadies, and the chapel exhales its warmth into the night. Outside, the sky is an ocean of ink. The stars, pale, sharp, seem closer here, as if leaning down to listen. The moon hangs low, brushing its light against rooftops, against frost, against faces turned upward. You walk with them down the hill. Their candles glow faintly, dots of gold trembling in the wind. No one speaks. The silence between them is full, not of emptiness, but of trust. In this world, faith is not shouted. It is lived quietly, in gestures, in repetition, in the patience of tending the same fire night after night. A prayer is not always a word. Sometimes, it is a movement, the act of mending, of forgiving, of rising again tomorrow. Back in the village, someone kneels to blow on an ember, coaxing it back to life. Another places a pot above it. The same hands that ploughed fields and washed linen now stir soup and trace the sign of the cross in steam. The sacred and the ordinary blend seamlessly. The bread is holy because it feeds. The fire is holy because it warms. The silence is holy because it listens. You sit by the doorway, watching shadows dance across the walls. The wind moans through the thatch, a sound both lonely and comforting. Somewhere outside, an owl calls. The world feels vast, but not indifferent. The people here do not question the existence of God. They live beside it in soil, in breath, in the light that bends through smoke. Faith is not a fortress. It is a thread thin, frayed, yet unbroken, that binds their days together. An old man near the fire begins to hum again. It is the same melody you heard in the chapel, but softer now, less formal. It mingles with the crackle of wood, the creak of the house, the faint murmur of sleep. The room grows dimmer. One by one, the candles go out. Darkness does not feel like loss, it feels like rest, as though the night itself is praying in silence. You lie back, feeling the weight of the blanket, the warmth of the air. The scent of smoke clings to everything, to your hair, your hands, your dreams. Somewhere, a bell rings once more, its echo stretching thin through the fog, and you realize the sacred is not somewhere distant. It lives quietly in the breath between one heartbeat and the next. It hides in stillness, waiting to be noticed. And in this quiet moment, beneath the ancient sky, you notice. Morning returns again, pale and deliberate. The village stirs under a thin mist that smells of hay and sleep. Smoke threads upward from a dozen chimneys, soft ribbons weaving through the grey. Beneath each roof, a woman rises quietly, before the sun fully wakes. Her day begins not with choice, but with motion. The weight of the world lives in her hands. She stirs the coals, rekindles the fire. She kneels on cold stone, pouring water from a clay jug into a basin. Steam blooms, delicate as breath. She washes her face, her arms, the small stretch of skin between sleeves. The cold bites, but she endures. Around her, the house murmurs awake. A child coughs, the door creaks. Somewhere outside, a rooster calls, echoed by a dog's bark. Life is not loud, it is layered, endless. She begins to knead dough, her wrists dusted white with flour. The dough resists her at first, heavy, stubborn, then softens under her palms. The rhythm is ancient: press, fold, turn, press again. The sound of it, the texture, the scent, all speak the same language her mother once spoke to her. The bread she bakes will feed them all, yet no one will remember her name for it. Her work, like wind, leaves no trace but life itself. You watch as she moves through her morning. Her back bends, her shoulders carry, her voice hums softly to herself. She doesn't think of herself as strong, she simply continues. Her strength is quiet, circular, stitched into repetition. Outside, laundry flaps in the pale wind. Strips of cloth, white, beige, faded, become flags of endurance. She scrubs each piece against a board, knuckles reddened by cold water. Her breath fogs the air. Beside her, her daughter helps, small hands mimicking large ones. "Like this," the woman whispers. The child nods, eyes intent. This is how strength is passed, not in words, but in gestures. Through doing, not declaring. The older women of the village gather near the well, their laughter muffled but bright. They speak of weather, of aches, of births and missing sheep. Each story folds into the next, forming a tapestry of shared endurance. Their faces, lined and sun-darkened, hold the knowledge of years no one wrote down. One of them tells of her daughter, lost in childbirth. Her voice doesn't tremble. She simply looks down at her hands, as though they, too, remember. Another woman touches her shoulder not to comfort, but to connect. Grief here is communal, not private. It is an inheritance, shared like bread. Later, when the men go to the fields, the women stay tending, mending, raising, waiting. One spins wool by the doorway, her spindle turning like time itself. Another patches a sleeve, humming under her breath. The rhythm of their labor creates a kind of music, the soft percussion of needles, the low drone of spinning thread, the distant thud of a wooden pestle crushing herbs. It is in these small acts that history survives. No chronicle records them, yet every era rests on their shoulders. In the afternoon, the sun slips through the clouds, painting warmth on her face. She pauses, wiping her hands on her apron. A faint smile flickers, not joy exactly, but a moment of remembering herself as more than duty. She watches the wind ripple through the wheat beyond the fence. For a heartbeat, she belongs only to herself. Then a cry, a child's, from inside. The moment closes like a book. She turns, swift and calm, back to what must be done. By evening, her hands ache. Her knees are dusted with straw. The bread has risen and cooled, the soup thickened, the laundry folded in neat piles. She sits for a moment by the fire, eyes half closed, the orange glow painting her skin. The others eat, first husband, children, elders. She waits, not resentfully, but as custom. The world has always asked her to be last, and she has learned to meet that asking with grace. When the bowls are empty, she eats what remains. A crust, a sip of broth, a small piece. Then she washes the dishes, sweeps the floor, tucks the children beneath their blankets. She smooths their hair, traces a small cross on each forehead, and whispers words no one will remember. Later, she sits by the doorway, staring at the moon through the cloth window. The world is silent except for the breath of those she loves. Her hands rest in her lap still, at last. If she prays, it is not for miracles. It is for the strength to do the same tomorrow, to wake again before the sun, to keep the fire, to feed, to hold, to heal, to endure. And in that small, humble wish lies the backbone of history. Because when kings fall and empires fade, it is she who remains invisible but unbroken, carrying the weight of time with the patience of the earth itself. The sky has grown pale again, not with dawn, but with a kind of tired light that belongs to the end of things. The season is changing. The air tastes different now, sharper, tinged with smoke and endings. Fields once golden now lie grey and brittle beneath the first frost. The earth, like a body, exhales and rests. The villagers move slower. Their steps drag in the dirt. Their laughter, when it comes, is softer, smaller. You can feel the hush settling over everything. A long, thin stillness between harvest and hunger. It is the season of survival and of memory. The air carries the scent of burning straw, of drying herbs hung in clusters above the hearth. Everything must be stored, preserved, protected. Hands shell beans, knives cut roots. Every motion is a kind of prayer against the cold to come. At night, they gather near the fire, closer than before. Shadows stretch across the walls, long, trembling, almost alive. Someone mends a shirt, another sharpens a blade. The flames crackle and spit, a restless creature trying to speak. Beyond the walls, the wind sighs through the thatch, carrying with it the distant cry of a wolf or the shifting branches of bare trees. Time here is circular, yet the body knows its line, a beginning, a middle, an end. Sickness has returned to the village, not in waves of panic, but in whispers. A cough, a fever, a door that stays closed for too long. There are no physicians, no potions stronger than patience. The women gather herbs, boil water, whisper names of saints over the sick. Children press cloths to their mothers' foreheads, learning compassion before they learn fear. In one corner, a candle burns for a man who has gone. The flame bends with each draught of wind, refusing to die. Death here is not a stranger, only a frequent guest who knows the way in. When it comes, no one screams. They murmur prayers, close eyes gently, fold hands across chests. A bell rings once. The world does not stop. The fire keeps burning. The bread still rises. The goats still bleat at dawn. Life continues, because it must. And that, perhaps, is its most sacred act. You walk among them, unseen, and sense that grief is different here. It does not consume, it lingers, like mist. It softens the edges of voices, slows the movements of hands, but it does not paralyze. The living do not turn away from death. They live beside it, the way one might live beside a cold river, aware, respectful, cautious, yet unafraid. At sunrise, the church bell tolls again. The villagers walk slowly toward the hill, carrying a wooden box wrapped in linen. Their breath clouds the air, merging with the morning fog. The priest walks ahead, his voice low, steady. The earth waits, open. They lower the box with care. Someone tosses a handful of soil, dark, damp, inevitable. A few tears fall, though most do not cry. The silence between them is thick, almost holy. When it is done, they turn back toward the village, steps heavy but steady. They do not speak of eternity. They think instead of supper, of warmth, of survival. Life, for them, is not denial of death, it is its answer. That night, as snow begins to fall, you stand by the doorway, watching the flakes drift like ash. The world glows faintly, the roofs white, the sky silver grey, the air filled with stillness that feels almost merciful. Inside, laughter returns. Small, hesitant, but real. A story is told, a song half remembered is sung. Even sorrow, here, must learn to make room for warmth. You realize that this, too, is part of endurance to keep light alive, not despite loss, but because of it. Later, when the house grows quiet again, a woman sits alone by the fire. She turns a rosary in her hand, whispering names, not to the heavens but to memory itself. Each bead is a heartbeat, each name a breath she refuses to let fade. Outside, the wind picks up. The door rattles. She stands, throws another log into the fire. Sparks fly upward, catching briefly in her eyes. The night stretches long, but she does not fear it. She knows that darkness, too, is part of the balance, that to rest is not to end, but to prepare. The next morning, the frost has deepened. The fields shimmer under a fragile skin of white. Somewhere in the distance, the same bell rings soft, steady, patient. The village endures, because that is what it has always done. And as you watch the smoke rise, curling into the pale sky, you realize death was never the end here. It was the pause that made life's rhythm visible, the shadow that allows the flame to be seen. Snow falls softly over the Baltic coast, not the kind that blinds or buries, but the kind that hushes the world, that turns every footstep into a whisper. It is 1744. The air tastes of salt and frost, and history is about to shift, not with thunder, but with the quiet resolve of a young girl stepping from one destiny into another. Her name is Sophia Augusta Frederica of Anhalt-Zerbst. She is 14. Her hands are small, but they already carry the weight of expectation. The carriage she travels in creaks over frozen ground. Inside, she sits upright despite the cold, her breath clouding before her. Her mother's words echo softly. You must be charming, but never naive. You must listen and remember everything. Outside the window, Russia awaits, an empire vast and foreign, where winter itself feels like a monarch, patient, powerful, absolute. Sophia presses her palm to the glass, tracing the frost that blooms there. The pattern reminds her of lace, or veins, or perhaps the delicate design of fate itself, beautiful and impossible to control. When she arrives in St. Petersburg, the air smells of wax, smoke, and snow. The palace looms before her, its walls gleaming pale against the dull sky, its windows glinting like frozen eyes. Inside, the warmth feels heavy, almost suffocating. Servants bow, courtiers whisper, and her mother's smile grows tight with ambition. Soon, she will meet the Empress. Elizabeth, majestic, unpredictable, draped in silks and jewels, her presence filling the hall like music and warning all at once. The girl curtsies deeply, her pulse quick and steady. She does not tremble. The Empress studies her, the delicate frame, the calm eyes, the poised silence. Something in the girl's restraint pleases her. Russia will suit you, Elizabeth says, almost to herself. And with that, Sophia's fate begins. Over the months that follow, she is transformed. Her German prayers become Russian. Her name becomes Catherine. Her faith, her language, even her heartbeat reshaped to match the empire's rhythm. She studies endlessly history, politics, philosophy. At night, she reads by candlelight, the wax dripping onto her notes, the ink smudged by her fingers. She memorizes faces, gestures, secrets. She learns how to listen without answering, how to smile without surrender. Her mother worries she is too quiet. But quietness, for Catherine, is not weakness. It is preparation. When she meets her future husband, Grand Duke Peter, she hides her disappointment behind courtesy. He is childish, careless, a boy who loves soldiers more than people, games more than duty. He laughs too loudly, drinks too deeply, and calls her too serious. She answers with a small, knowing smile. Already, she has begun to understand the world of men who rule without grace, and how women must learn to rule without permission. Her nights are long. She lies awake listening to the sound of distant sleigh bells, of snow falling against the window, of her own thoughts arranging themselves into resolve. In her private journal, she writes, "I will be greater than they imagine. I will not simply survive, I will become necessary." The candle burns low. She dips her quill again. Her handwriting is precise, measured the mark of someone who knows control is a kind of armor. Sometimes she dreams of her homeland, the smell of pine forests, the sound of her father's laughter, the softness of summer air. But those dreams fade with dawn. Russia demands her whole self, and she intends to give it not as surrender, but as strategy. Winter deepens. The river freezes into glass, reflecting the cold stars above. Catherine walks the palace corridors wrapped in fur, her footsteps echoing against marble. Servants bow. Ministers nod. None yet see the fire beneath her calm. She watches everything: how the Empress listens, how Peter squanders favor, how the court turns with gossip like reeds in the wind. Observation becomes her art. Patience becomes her weapon. And in this silence, something begins to awaken inside her, not vanity, not greed, but a sense of direction. The feeling that she has been placed here, not to adorn history, but to alter it. One evening, as snow drifts across the palace courtyard, Catherine stands by the window. The light from the chandeliers glints on her reflection. She looks at the girl in the glass pail, composed, her breath fogging the surface. "I will learn this country," she whispers. "I will love it until it loves me back." Outside, the wind howls across the Neva. The city sleeps beneath frost and candlelight. Somewhere, a bell tolls from a distant church, soft, patient, inevitable. And within that sound, the girl called Catherine takes her first breath as something more than herself. Not yet an empress, but no longer a child. History turns quietly that night, not with sword or crown, but with resolve, silent and sure as falling snow. The palace at Oranienbaum stands pale beneath the frozen sky, all marble, mirrors, and echoing corridors that never seem to end. The air smells faintly of wax and iron. Outside, the Neva lies locked under ice, silent as a sealed secret. Inside, Catherine moves like a shadow through gilded halls. Her steps are quiet, her gestures precise. Every smile, every glance, every silence measured. The court is a theater, and she has learned to play her role with grace so restrained it almost becomes invisible. Her husband, Grand Duke Peter, fills the halls with noise. He parades toy soldiers across polished floors, imitates Prussian officers, and drinks until his laughter turns hollow. He adores everything foreign, especially what Russia despises. His moods change like the wind, his temper sharp and sudden. Catherine watches, always, not with bitterness, but with something colder focus. She understands that survival here depends not on affection, but on patience. In the mornings, she reads. In the afternoons, she listens to the gossip of servants, to the sighs of courtiers, to the tone of the Empress's letters. Every whisper is a thread in the tapestry she is quietly weaving. At night, when the palace finally sleeps, she lights a single candle and writes. Her quill moves quickly, silently, across the page. Notes on governance, philosophy, power. She copies Voltaire's letters by hand, underlining words like reason and virtue, circling freedom. She dreams, not of love, but of enlightenment, a realm where knowledge can build more than walls, where a ruler might guide rather than command. Yet she says nothing aloud. Her power, for now, is the power of endurance. Peter grows restless with her quiet. He calls her dull, accuses her of pretending to be wise. He laughs in the company of other women, soldiers, fools, but Catherine answers none of it. She bows her head, smiles politely, and remembers everything. The court begins to notice her composure. Ministers find her words thoughtful, her manner deliberate. Even those who mock her begin to admire the calm she carries, as though it were a light that does not burn. One evening, during a formal dinner, Peter mocks the Russian guards, his own men. The room stiffens. The air grows brittle. Catherine sits beside him, eyes lowered, hiding her reaction. She feels the shift, a flicker of loyalty in the soldier's gaze, turning toward her, not him. That night, she lies awake and listens to the wind clawing at the windows. She realizes that power, in its earliest form, does not shout. It listens, it waits, it learns when others forget to. Her solitude grows heavier. She eats alone, walks alone, prays in whispers. But she finds comfort in her mind, that quiet room where no one else can enter. She begins to gather allies quietly, a lady in waiting who brings her news, an officer who admires her intellect, a diplomat who lends her forbidden books. None of it is open rebellion, only preparation, the slow, steady building of trust. When the Empress Elizabeth grows ill, the court trembles with uncertainty. Who will rule when she is gone? Peter, the heir, is impulsive, unsteady, and unpopular. Whispers rise like steam in the corridors. Some pity Catherine, others already imagine her downfall. She says nothing, but inside her, something hardens, not cruelty, but purpose. On cold mornings, she rides through the palace grounds. The trees stand black and bare against the snow. Ravens circle the towers. She feels the empire breathing beneath her, vast, flawed, magnificent, and she begins to understand how love for a country can become indistinguishable from responsibility. Once, after a long ride, she returns to her room and finds frost tracing the inside of the window pane. She draws a small circle with her finger and watches it melt. The gesture feels symbolic, though she cannot yet say why. Peter bursts into the room later, flushed from drink, muttering about soldiers and betrayal. He accuses her of plotting, then laughs it off. His laughter fills the hall like the clatter of broken glass. Catherine says nothing. She pours him wine, smiles faintly. Inside, her silence begins to take shape, no longer resignation, but a map. That night, in her journal, she writes, "If power is a cage, then I must learn its shape so I may one day slip between its bars." The candle trembles. Wax spills onto the desk. Beyond the window, the wind carries the faint toll of a church bell, slow, deliberate, eternal. She listens to it the way a soldier listens to orders. In her mind, she sees the empire spread before her like a chessboard, each piece alive, each move waiting. She knows the game has begun. But she also knows this: patience can be a weapon sharper than steel, and in her stillness, in her poise, in the cage built for her, Catherine has already begun to shape the crown that one day will fit her perfectly. Summer of 1762. The sky over St. Petersburg is the color of pewter, heavy and waiting. The river moves slowly, thick with light. Somewhere beyond the palace gates, the empire itself seems to hold its breath. Inside, Catherine does not tremble. She has spent years rehearsing this moment in silence, the stillness of patience, the discipline of waiting, the art of watching men destroy themselves. Peter, now emperor, has reigned for only a few months. His uniform shines, his words slur, his laughter echoes too loudly in marble halls. He talks of abandoning St. Petersburg, of waging foolish wars, of mocking the church and army alike. His crown gleams brightly, but it sits on air. Catherine knows the empire does not love him, and love, in Russia, is another word for loyalty. Her rooms are small, dim, lined with books. She dresses plainly, almost modestly, her mind sharp beneath silk. Every visitor, every servant, every rumor that passes her door becomes another thread in her tapestry. One evening, as rain taps softly at the windows, a soldier comes. He bows deeply. "Your Highness," he whispers. The guards are ready. Catherine nods once. No flourish, no fear. History rarely begins with thunder. It begins with footsteps. Before dawn, she leaves the palace quietly, her cloak heavy with dew. The streets are empty, except for the faint sound of horses and the wet slap of hooves against stone. She rides toward the barracks, toward the soldiers who have already chosen her. When she arrives, the air trembles with restraint. The men kneel, their breath visible in the cool light. They call her not Duchess, not wife, but Empress. She feels the words settle around her like armor, not given, but earned. A priest steps forward, trembling, holding a small golden cross. Catherine kisses it calmly, as if sealing a promise not to the heavens, but to the land itself. Her voice, when she speaks, is low but clear. I come not for power, but for Russia. I will serve her with reason, with strength, and with mercy. The men rise. The cheers are muffled, reverent, almost afraid to wake the city. By midday, Peter has fled the capital. By nightfall, he has abdicated. A week later, he is dead, not by her hand, but by the inevitable weight of consequence. The city does not weep for him. The bells ring again, this time not in mourning, but in proclamation. And so, in the pale light of that July morning, Catherine rides through Street Petersburg wearing a soldier's coat, the imperial sash across her chest. Her eyes are steady, her mouth unsmiling. The people kneel. The wind lifts her hair. Somewhere, a child drops a flower into the dust, and it lands softly at the hoof of her horse. For the first time in her life, Catherine breathes freely. Yet freedom, she knows, is another kind of burden. That night, in her private chamber, she stands before a mirror. The candlelight flickers against the glass, and she studies her reflection not as a queen admiring her beauty, but as a soldier counting her scars. Her crown lies on the table beside her. She does not touch it. She knows that power, once worn, never truly comes off. She thinks of the girl she once was, Sophia, 14, shivering in a foreign palace, tracing frost on a window. That girl still lives inside her somewhere, though she no longer waits to be chosen. Catherine whispers to her reflection, half a vow, half a warning. You are empress now, but do not forget how it felt to be powerless. Outside, the city glows faintly under a restless sky. The air hums with possibility and danger, as though the empire itself is waking from a long, uneasy dream. The corridors beyond her room are silent, yet filled with echoes, footsteps of soldiers, whispers of courtiers, the ghost of a crown changing heads. She sits by the window, watching the first light of dawn crawl over the river. The water is grey, calm, unbothered by revolution. History, she realizes, does not roar. It turns quietly, like a tide, reshaping the shore grain by grain. Her rule will begin not with celebration, but with work. There will be laws to mend, armies to steady, hearts to win. And she will do it as she has done everything, not loudly, but completely. When she finally sleeps, her hands rest open on her lap, empty of fear. The candle burns low beside her, its flame long and thin, steady, like her resolve. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, though it is summer still. A quiet omen, perhaps that even in warmth, Russia remembers its winter. And in that strange stillness, beneath the faint ringing of distant bells, the girl who became an empress drifts into her first night of rule, not in triumph, but in peace. The first years of Catherine's reign unfold not with fireworks or coronations, but with ink, paper, and sleepless nights. The palace grows quieter now, the kind of quiet that hums with thought. The sound of footsteps on marble has been replaced by the scratch of her pen, the shuffle of couriers, the whispered discussions of reform. She rises before dawn. The corridors are still dark, and frost glitters on the windows like lace. Servants move silently, carrying trays of tea and letters. She drinks slowly, eyes scanning the words of her ministers, her philosophers, her spies. Each letter is a pulse of the empire, each sentence a thread in a vast, fragile web she must hold together. Russia, she knows, is enormous, and so is its suffering. Beyond the palace walls, peasants till frozen soil, nobles bicker over privilege, armies wait unpaid at the borders. Yet Catherine does not despair. She believes that reason slow, deliberate, radiant, can lift even the heaviest darkness. At her desk, she writes, "The sovereign is not above the people, but stands beside them. To rule is to serve, wisely." It is not a slogan. It is a promise she repeats to herself whenever the weight of the crown begins to press. In the afternoons, she walks the library she has built, hundreds of volumes in French, Latin, and Russian. Voltaire's letters lie open on her desk, Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws marked with careful notes. She studies, debates, dreams of a nation governed by intellect rather than fear. Courtiers whisper that she is too idealistic. Generals grumble that philosophy cannot win wars. But Catherine smiles and continues to write, her quill tracing blue veins of ink across white paper, her own kind of battle plan. She drafts the nakaz, her instruction, a blueprint for justice. In it, she condemns torture, argues for education, and declares that all men, even peasants, possess the same soul. Laws, she writes, must be built not from habit, but from reason. The Senate blinks in disbelief. To them, she is both miraculous and dangerous, a woman who quotes philosophers instead of saints, who governs not by inheritance, but by intellect. Yet she does not slow. She invites scholars from Paris, artists from Rome, architects from Berlin. Street Petersburg begins to glow a city of columns, domes, and marble light, built not merely for power, but for beauty. And still, she works. Late into the night, candles burning low, she reads reports from the provinces. Floods, fires, rebellions, famine. Her empire is too large to embrace, but she tries. She writes letters until dawn, offering aid, demanding answers, sending comfort in sentences that carry both grace and command. Sometimes, when her eyes ache from reading, she steps onto the balcony. The river below gleams darkly beneath a silver moon. The air is sharp, alive with snow. She breathes it in and thinks of the girl she once was, cold, foreign, uncertain, and feels the quiet satisfaction of having built her own warmth. Yet peace never stays. There are conspiracies, always. Old loyalties to Peter whisper through corridors. Foreign kings watch her every move, waiting for her to falter. Even her own son, Paul, grows distant, shadowed by jealousy and fear. Catherine knows this, but she does not let fear guide her. Instead, she builds walls, not of stone, but of wisdom, correspondence, and the loyalty of minds. She writes to Voltaire, "I am a pupil of the Enlightenment, but my classroom is an empire." He replies with admiration. To him, she is the star of the North, a monarch who reads philosophy at midnight while ruling millions by dawn. She smiles when she reads his words, not from vanity, but from recognition. She is no longer learning light, she is making it. Still, she remains pragmatic. When idealism meets rebellion, she answers not with dreams, but with discipline. The Pugachev uprising shakes her faith, forces her to remember that reason cannot always soften hunger. She weeps alone that night, not from pity, but from the realization that even wisdom must sometimes wield a sword. And yet, even after such lessons, she does not turn cynical. To despair, she believes, is a failure of imagination. So she keeps writing, keeps building schools, keeps sending doctors to the villages. The people rarely see her face, but they feel her presence in the roads repaired, in the hospitals founded, in the letters she signs each dawn. In her later journals, she writes, "If I am to be remembered, let it not be for conquest, but for creation. I wish to leave the world a little more reasonable than I found it." She closes the book, blows out the candle. The flame gutters, then steadies once more. Outside, the snow falls quiet, ceaseless, patient. The palace glows faintly through the frost, a lighthouse in an endless winter. And within it, a woman writes on, her pen moving like a lantern through the dark, steady, unwavering, certain that reason, even when small, can still be light. The years have grown long and pale. The empire, once a storm of ambition and flame, now lies under a quiet blanket of snow. The palaces are warmer, grander, filled with art and marble, yet the air tastes of endings. Catherine is no longer the girl of frost and hunger, nor the queen of bright revolutions. She is an old woman now, sharp still, but slower, surrounded by mirrors and ghosts. In the mornings, she wakes to silence. The corridors of the Winter Palace stretch endlessly ahead, lit by thin light that filters through frosted glass. Servants move quietly, bowing low. Outside, the Neva sleeps under ice once more. Catherine sits by the window, her quill resting beside untouched paper. She no longer needs to write every law herself. The machine of her empire moves without her hand now, and yet she cannot stop thinking. Power, she realizes, is a kind of weather. It warms, it burns, it freezes. And now, in its winter, it grows still. Her hand trembles slightly as she lifts a cup of tea. The taste is bitter, but she prefers it that way. Bitterness feels honest. Around her, portraits line the walls. Generals, philosophers, lovers, sons. Each face a memory, each memory a lesson. She has outlived nearly all of them. Once, she loved a man named Potemkin, wild, brilliant, unpredictable. Together they dreamed of cities, of fleets, of glory carved from the southern steppe. Now he is gone, and the maps they once drew are her only witnesses. She still keeps his letters in a small box, bound with blue silk. Some days, she reads them again, not out of longing, but gratitude. He had seen her not as a crown, but as a mind. Her son, Paul, visits rarely. Their meetings are formal, brittle as glass. He speaks of inheritance, she speaks of duty. Between them lies a silence, so wide even love cannot cross it. She fears for him not his safety, but his smallness. Power will not fit him as it fit her. At night, she dreams of simpler rooms, straw beds, candle smoke, the ache of work. She dreams of the girl tracing frost on a window pane, unaware that history was already watching. In the quiet hours, she wanders her study. Books tower like sentinels. Voltaire's volumes still rest on her desk, their pages soft with use. She touches the spines gently, as one might greet old friends. They no longer instruct her, they accompany her. Sometimes she writes again, though only in fragments now, reflections, half-thoughts, the philosophy of solitude. The greatest danger of rule, she writes, is to become convinced that one's own mind is the world. She pauses, then adds, wisdom is not in conquering others, but in remaining curious, even at the end. The candle burns lower, the wax pooling like melted snow. She feels the cold creeping through her rings, settling in her bones. It does not frighten her. Cold, after all, has always been her element. Outside, sleigh bells echo faintly through the streets. The city she built her city still lives, still breathes. Its domes glint like frostbitten stars. Its people whisper her name, not as fear, but as habit, a constant presence, like the river or the snow. In moments of reflection, she wonders what will remain when she is gone. Will they remember her conquests or her words? Will they see the empress or the woman beneath the crown, the one who listened, who read, who believed that thought itself could be an act of love? She writes one final note, not to her ministers, but to herself. All power ends. But what we build from it, if it carries light, may outlive even time. As she sets the pen down, her hand lingers over the page. The ink glistens, then dries into permanence. Dawn creeps through the window, brushing her silver hair with gold. The world outside stirs another morning, another empire in motion. Catherine stands, slowly. She walks to the balcony, leaning on the marble rail. The air bites her skin, sharp and clean. She looks out across the Neva, toward the horizon she has ruled for more than 3 decades. For the first time, she does not think of power or legacy. She simply watches the light. It falls on the roofs, the spires, The frozen river, the same light she once promised to bring to her people. It has come, quietly, without her needing to command it. And as the sky softens from grey to silver, the Empress closes her eyes, breathing in the still, bright air, not as ruler, but as woman, finally at peace with the winter she has made. The mirror has stood in the same corner of Catherine's room for decades tall, framed in gilt, its surface softened by time. In the mornings, it catches the pale northern light and scatters it gently across the floor, like the reflection of a river long forgotten. She sits before it now, not in vanity, but in contemplation. The woman who looks back at her is both familiar and strange, face lined but not broken, eyes still bright beneath the silver of age. The reflection feels less like a self, and more like a story she has been telling for a lifetime. Around her, the winter palace breathes. The walls hold whispers, the scratch of quills, the rustle of silk, the murmur of voices that once filled these rooms with schemes and laughter. So many of them are gone now: Voltaire, Diderot, Potemkin, Elizabeth, even the courtiers who flattered and feared her. She has become the last witness to her own era. The mirror blurs slightly with her breath. For a moment, she sees not her reflection, but all herselves layered within it. The girl of Anhalt Zerbst, trembling in a foreign carriage, the young duchess who learned silence as armor, the woman who wrote by candlelight while the empire slept, the empress who ruled with both intellect and solitude. Every version of her still lives here, flickering like candlelight behind the glass. She touches the mirror's surface, leaving the faint print of her hand. The glass is cool, grounding. "So this is what remains," she murmurs. "A life turned into memory, and memory turned into air." The attendants enter softly, bringing documents, reports, signatures, the daily weight of empire. She signs each one carefully, though her hand is slower now. Even her script has aged. Once crisp and bold, now slanted, elegant, deliberate. "Your Majesty, you must rest," one of them says gently. Catherine smiles. "Rest," she repeats, almost amused. "There will be time enough for that soon." When they leave, she opens her journal, a leather-bound volume worn thin at the edges. The pages smell of ink and dust. On its first page, written years ago, is a sentence she once loved. "To be great is to serve the future, not the past." She reads it now, and for the first time, she understands its cost. The future always asks for more than the present can give. It demands what you cannot live to see. Her eyes drift again to the mirror. She studies the light across her face, uneven, trembling, but still present. Time has not stolen her entirely. It has only softened her into truth. She thinks of Russia vast, difficult, magnificent, of the people she tried to serve, of the schools built, the roads laid, the words written, of the mistakes too, the rebellions she crushed, the promises she broke, the mercy she sometimes forgot. And yet, she feels no regret, only continuity. Life, she realizes, is not judged by perfection, but by persistence, by the effort to make light where there was none. A wind rattles the windows. Snow is falling again, fine as ash. She remembers the first winter she spent here, years ago, frightened and young, hearing the same sound and believing it was the voice of fate. Now it feels different, like a song she finally knows the words to. A maid enters, carrying a letter. "From the Academy, Your Majesty. They wish to name a library after you." Catherine laughs softly. "How fitting," she says. "Books, they have been my truest companions." When the girl leaves, she looks once more at her reflection. The candle beside her burns low, its flame bending toward the glass. The two lights, one real, one reflected, waver together, indistinguishable. She thinks, perhaps this is all memory truly is. A reflection so persistent it begins to glow on its own. The clock strikes. The hour slides gently across the room. Catherine closes her journal. She does not sign her name this time. The last page remains blank, not from hesitation, but from peace. She knows some stories should end in silence. As she stands, the mirror catches her movement, one last shimmer of light along the gilt frame. For a moment, it seems to hold not her age, but her essence. Steady, thoughtful, unafraid. Outside, the snow thickens, wrapping the city in white. The river beneath the ice hums faintly, a song of motion beneath stillness. Somewhere, a bell tolls, low and slow. Its echo folds into the walls, the curtains, the air. Catherine listens, then turns back to the mirror. Her reflection fades into the candlelight, not gone, just absorbed, as though history itself has drawn her back into its breath. She whispers one final sentence, too soft for anyone to hear. Let me be remembered not as ruler, but as witness to light, to reason, to the possibility of gentleness. The flame steadies, the night deepens, and the mirror, for the first time in 50 years, stands empty, holding only the memory of the woman who once filled it with thought. The morning breaks cold and colorless over Street Petersburg. The palace stands still, its windows fogged, its courtyard silent. A thin frost has crept across the marble floors, softening the edges of grandeur. Servants move quietly through the corridors, their steps light, their faces pale. Something has shifted, not the air, but the heartbeat of the empire itself. The empress is gone. It happens not with thunder, but with breath, one exhalation softer than the last. She had risen early, as always. She had read dispatches, signed a letter, spoken to her attendants. Then, without ceremony, her hand had fallen still. The ink dried mid-sentence. For a long moment, the palace does not move. The silence spreads, slow and solemn, as if the walls themselves are listening. Then the word passes like a current through the rooms. Catherine is dead. The courtiers gather, their whispers restrained but restless. Outside, the bells of Street Isaacs begin to toll, not hurriedly, not mournfully, but with a strange steadiness, as though they are measuring the end of something too vast for grief. In the streets, people stop. Fishermen by the river remove their hats. Merchants bow their heads. Even the horses seem to pause mid-step. No proclamation is needed. The city knows. For nearly half a century, she had been its mind, its architect, its compass, its silent pulse. Now that pulse has ceased, and yet the world continues, stubbornly, as she had taught it to. In the Winter Palace, candles are lit, hundreds of them, small flames trembling in the vast rooms she once filled with thought. The scent of wax and cold roses mingles with the faint hum of prayer. Her body lies in state, wrapped in white and gold, her crown resting above her head. The light plays gently over her face, serene, composed, as if she were only deep in study. They will bury her beside Peter, though she had long outlived his shadow. The irony is not lost on the few who dare to think it. Power writes its own poetry, and sometimes its verses are cruel. Among those who come to pay respect are soldiers who once swore allegiance in the barracks that first morning of her reign. Many are old now, bent, limping, their uniforms threadbare. They bow deeply, not because of duty, but because of memory. One man whispers, "She was Russia." And perhaps, for a time, she was. Beyond the palace, snow falls. It coats the city in quiet white, as if the heavens themselves have chosen to write her elegy in silence. The courtiers, ever cautious, speak already of succession of pall, of policy, of stability. History does not pause for mourning, it only changes its hands. But the people linger. They stand outside the gates, candles in their palms, their breath rising like smoke. No speeches, no banners, just light, fragile, flickering, human. And in those lights, something of her remains. Not the empress of marble and decree, but the woman who wrote by candlelight, who believed that thought could outlast flesh. Somewhere in the palace library, a page she once touched still carries the faint imprint of her hand, a smudge of ink, a margin note, a trace of presence invisible yet enduring. Weeks pass. The rituals fade. The crown shifts. But the world she imagined continues to breathe. Schools where children learn not fear but reason. Hospitals where compassion outweighs punishment. roads where travelers cross a land once bound by silence. Even the scholars of distant Europe write her name with a kind of reverence. To them, she was a paradox, made flesh, power and intellect, mercy and command, woman and ruler entwined. In the years to come, her portrait will hang in museums, her face calm, unreadable. Historians will debate her virtues and her sins. Some will call her tyrant, others savior, but none will deny her presence, the light she struck against centuries of dark. And as decades fold into centuries, the city she built still carries her rhythm. When snow falls over the Neva, when the bells toll at dusk, when a scholar opens a book beneath dim candlelight somewhere, faintly, she is there, not as ghost, not as queen, but as thought still alive, still reaching, still illuminating what it means to be both powerful and human. The mirror in her old chamber now stands covered in cloth. Dust gathers on its frame, but sometimes, when the sun moves through the window, a glint escapes the fabric, a spark of gold, quick and bright. Perhaps it is only light, or perhaps it is memory, refusing to rest. For history does not end with the death of its makers. It continues in the silence they leave behind, in the words, the reforms, the courage that remain like footsteps in the snow. And somewhere, beneath that endless white sky, the empire she shaped still dreams of reason, of knowledge, of light. Night returns to the world Catherine once ruled. The palace, the empire, the century all have folded into quiet. What remains are whispers, the creak of an old corridor, the sigh of wind through marble halls, the hush of snow falling endlessly upon forgotten gates. History, too, grows tired. Even the grandest of empires must one day rest. Inside the winter palace, the rooms are dim. Paintings of triumph now fade beneath layers of dust and candle smoke. The chandeliers no longer blaze. Their crystals hang still, like frozen tears. Somewhere, a clock ticks faintly, unsure whether to keep time or surrender to silence. The great woman is gone, but her shadow still breathes soft and weightless, woven into the fabric of the walls. The servants speak her name in low tones, as though saying it too loudly might awaken something. Outside, the river murmurs under its sheet of ice. The city she built has changed, yet in the stillness of night, it feels unchanged, a monument not only to power, but to the human longing for meaning. And so the story slows. Catherine's empire is no longer an empire. The thrones that followed her have toppled and risen again. The palaces that glittered now stand as museums. Their halls echo with the footsteps of strangers who speak her name as legend. But history, for all its noise, always ends in quiet. The battles fade, the decrees yellow, the words of kings lose their heat. What remains is softer a feeling, a presence, a memory that hums beneath the surface of time. Somewhere, in a far corner of the world, a reader opens a book. The page whispers her story again. The ink revives the pulse of her thought. A mind across centuries leans forward and listens, and for that brief instant, Catherine breathes again, not as ruler, not as myth, but as voice. The world forgets names, but it remembers echoes. And the echo of her life, that fierce belief in reason, that faith in light still stirs whenever someone chooses thought over fear. This is how history truly sleeps. Not erased, but dreaming, waiting to be remembered. If you walk the streets of St. Petersburg at night, you might still feel her there. In the curve of a bridge, in the hush of the river, in the golden flicker of a lamp beside an old library window, her city hums quietly, like a heart remembering its first rhythm. The snow drifts endlessly, patient and kind. It covers the marble lions, the statues, the carriages that once carried her name through the streets. It covers victory and defeat alike, until both are equal under white. And beneath that gentle weight, the centuries breathe in sleep. What was empire is now story. What was rule is now reflection. What was Catherine, the girl, the queen, the philosopher, the woman has become something vaster and gentler, a part of the slow dreaming of history itself. In the stillness of that dream, time loosens its grip. The past no longer feels far away. It feels close, like breath, like memory, like snow melting on your palm. And maybe that is all history ever wanted, not to be remembered perfectly, but to be felt, to linger in the quiet moments between waking and rest. When the mind drifts and the heart listens, the candle flickers once, then steadies. The pages close. Outside, the Neva glows faintly under the moon, carrying its ancient, icy song to the sea. Somewhere, beyond centuries, the story folds itself gently shut. The empire sleeps. The mirror is covered. The light, though faint, continues to burn, not in palaces, but in thought. And as the snow falls, slow and endless, the world turns its face toward silence. History exhales and sleeps. The snow has fallen for what feels like forever. It covers the world Catherine once knew, the palaces, the fields, the roads where armies marched and lovers once parted. Everything sleeps beneath that weightless white, and in the silence, time begins to blur. The river no longer moves, it only glows. The air is filled with the soft rhythm of a world breathing in its sleep. Somewhere, beyond the walls of history, a faint light trembles, not the flame of a candle, not the shine of gold, but something purer, the echo of thought, still alive. This is where the story drifts beyond empire, beyond the crown, beyond the boundaries of what was written. For even the greatest lives, when remembered with tenderness, dissolve not into endings, but into light. Catherine is no longer a woman nor a queen. She has become something simpler, a pulse in the long dream of humanity, where each generation inherits not her throne, but her question. What does it mean to rule wisely? What does it mean to be awake in the darkness? Her words have scattered like seeds. Some sprouted into books, others into whispers in classrooms, in hearts, in quiet decisions made for the sake of reason instead of fear. Each one, in its own way, still burns. If you listen closely, you can hear it, a murmur rising through time, delicate as snow, patient as dawn. It says, learn, think, do not be cruel, even when the world tempts you to be. These were never just the lessons of a ruler, but of a soul that believed thought itself was mercy, that to understand was the purest form of power. Now, history has closed its eyes. The ink has dried, the mirrors are covered, but within that stillness, something shines. Perhaps all the great stories end this way, not with victory or defeat, but with illumination. The mind, having journeyed through shadow and glory alike, finds itself resting at the edge of understanding, where silence is not emptiness, but peace. The dream of light continues. In it, Catherine walks again, not through halls of marble, but through snowfields without end. Her footsteps leave no mark. The air parts gently, welcoming her. She carries no crown, no burden, only a small, steady glow cupped in her hands, the same light that once guided her pen, her choices, her faith in reason. Around her, voices drift like wind, the laughter of courtiers, the prayers of peasants, the low hum of a city learning to think for itself. They fade, merge, and become one long, slow heartbeat. She pauses and looks back, not at Russia, not at power, but at life itself. So much love, so much pain, so many mornings that once seemed ordinary, now eternal. The snow glows softly around her, the horizon bends into light, and as she steps forward, she becomes less and less a figure, more and more a brightness, a whisper that history keeps repeating whenever someone chooses knowledge over ignorance, grace over force, light over shadow. The dream has no end, only a rhythm, slow, tender, infinite. Somewhere, a reader closes the book. The candle beside them flickers once, then steadies. Outside their window, perhaps in another century, snow begins to fall. The same quiet snow, the same patient world, and for a moment, as the room softens into stillness, they feel her there, not as empress, not as legend, but as warmth passing gently through the air. The dream of light is not hers alone. It belongs to all who listen, all who think, all who dare to believe that gentleness is strength, and that even in the deepest night, the mind can still make its own sunrise. The world exhales, the story rests, and the light that quiet, knowing light keeps burning, softly, forever.